Welcome to this special Pulse of Payment series titled Swipe Right on SoftPOS, Unlocking Payment Freedom. A special 6-part series brought to you in collaboration with Ingenico, the global leader in payments. SoftPOS is a revolutionary technology that lets merchants accept payments on any smartphone or device, unlocking a world of possibilities. Join us as we dive deep into SoftPOS with Ingenico thought leaders, satisfied customers, and innovative partners. Discover how this flexible solution can streamline your checkout, expand your reach, and deliver a seamless payment experience for your customers, all while moving your commerce forward. Buckle up and get ready to swipe right on SoftPOS and unlock payment freedom.
Today, Tony Walsh, head of retail sales from Ingenico, joins me for our second episode in our Pulse of Payment series focused on SoftPOS. In the first episode, we had a great high-level overview from Jason Stanchfield, so I suggest you go listen to that episode, which is episode 298. So, Tony, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad you've joined us. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. If you don't mind, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and a little about your professional journey as well.
Yeah, sure. This will be fun. I'm a native New Yorker, relocated to the great city of Atlanta, where I spent 25 years in the payments industry. But during the pandemic, I traded the pine trees for some palm trees and headed down to Northeast Florida, where I reside now, working for Ingenico now the past 6 years, heading up our retail sales practice for the United States. And that encompasses our go-to-market direct enterprise customers, as well as our ecosystem solution customers and emerging payments. So the journey has been quite a ride, and seen pre-PCI payments to today where we're heavily compliant, and it's been such a pretty cool ride.
Awesome. Well, just to give our audience a quick reminder, can you tell our audience what SoftPOS is?
Yeah, sure. So think SoftPOS being where you can take any Android or iOS device that has an NFC antenna or NFC capability and turn it into a payments acceptor, right? So we've got these devices, they're supercomputers that we put in our pockets every day. And there's just a lot of use cases where you can envision, hey, wouldn't it be great if I could just take a tap payment from an IoT device or a card with an antenna on it? So let's just see if we can't find a unique way to embrace the payments industry from a different perspective.
Okay, and just for even my own knowledge, it doesn't have to be a phone, right? It could be a purpose-built device or some other device, as long as it has the NFC capability. Is that fair?
Right. So long as it's Android or iOS, yeah. Any device that has an NFC in it, great question, because it does, right? It moves itself right into the tablets or built for purpose. But the tablets that are coming off the shelves today from the large manufacturers are ruggedized. They're ready to be dumped in buckets of water, right? So they could survive a lot of use cases. So long as it has an NFC chip in it, let's turn it to a payments acceptor.
Okay. And you mentioned again the Android and iOS. Now that's because you have software. They have software that needs to be downloaded. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's just the operating systems that allow for the technology to reside on the device. Really, that's where it's at. And it really was designed to be a mobility use case at first. And so these devices in our pockets are largely iOS and Android. And we see the Android uptick across the retail landscape right now because of the affordability of the technology.
Okay, got it. All right. So what we're going to focus on is a couple of things in this episode. One is the value or the benefits of SoftPOS. And two are the use cases, or said another way, the types and sizes of businesses that can benefit from SoftPOS. So kind of with that background, let's go ahead and dive into the meat of the conversation. So what are some of the value props or benefits of using SoftPOS?
Yeah. So think about it this way. The largest benefit today, well, I don't want to say largest. Let's just kind of break these down. But if you think about it, the value and the benefit are going to be tangible to the use case. So in many use cases that we've all seen in the retail landscape, where we've got a payment device or kind of a paired payment device with a tablet of some type, we see a lot, or even in taxi cab services or other use cases where you see a dongle plugged into a socket of a phone, right? We are in those cases deploying PCI estates to the retailers or to fleets, if you will. In that case, we are putting a load not just on cost of buying payment devices and integration and plugging them in, but it's the estate management of all these devices. We need to know where every serial number is in the estate. We need to maintain the estate. The estate would attrit, find themselves in garbage pails in people's pockets in the cars going home from work. So part of the value here that is pretty interesting is don't buy that payment. Don't buy those payment devices any longer. Don't roll out a payment estate when we're seeing more and more of cards issued with antennas, right? So we could take that and flip those cards onto a tap payment. We also are seeing a lot of cards being, like, give you an example of loyalty gift being provisioned to phones, right? So we're more and more as a society utilizing the wallets that are on board our phones to provision different payment types. So as we evolve as a paying society, we're seeing more and more use cases where it's Internet of Things, is moving those payment types to your phone so that now we can satisfy many of the use cases 80, 90% with a SoftPOS type application. We don't need a physical tap card that goes in. So we've got quite a unique opportunity there from a value. Don't roll out hardware anymore. That's kind of the message that we like to talk to our customers about. And it's kind of funny because we get a lot of times, hey, aren't you kind of sabotaging your own business? We're Ingenico, after all, the largest hardware provider in the world, payment technology. But not really, right? We're trying to provide convenience and flexibility to our customers. We want to be the take payments forward type company, not take it backwards, right? So as we look forward, we are seeing that there's a tremendous push for simplifying the retail landscape.
So, Tony, thanks for sharing that. So, obviously, the way you position that is a lot of use cases, which we're going to talk in more detail in a minute, involve hardware. That hardware could be from the terminals. A lot of people want to call them bricks, which I'm sure you hate that term, but the bricks that sit on countertops, the tablets, the extra things that people or companies have to buy in order to take payments. There's really a cost savings component to that. And then the convenience of using an existing device and the flexibility of it. Is that kind of a good summary?
Yeah, Greg. I mean, if you think about it, we could go and walk together through a traditional retail mall and see probably 30 different use cases for SoftPOS, right? In 30 steps, right? I mean, in reality, if you go walk into an electronics store that has a traditional point of sale, and that point of sale has a traditional payment terminal sitting there, that's a great use case for payments, right? But what we're seeing in the retail landscape is that more and more the retailer wants to engage the customer where the customer is shopping. So in a lot of times, shrinking that experience to, hey, we're e-tailing, we're having a conversation, and let's go ahead and just purchase this item on the spot. And that requires a different implementation of payment technology. And that's where SoftPOS really can be a big help. It's time to market for the retailer. It's cost of implementation for the retailer. And it becomes a convenience for the consumer in that environment. As we walk through that same mall, we come to the kiosks that have multiple different types of products on it. And these folks have to plug in payment terminals and find power to do that, and all sorts of other challenges. One that have a SoftPOS that's provisioned or issued by your acquirer right to your phone, and you can take payments on your phone. So it really enables the retailers and businesses to pick and choose how they want to implement payment technology. So it may not be a one size fit all, but it's certainly augmentative or in some cases the way to implement the payment technology for card present. So yeah, lots of different ways to imagine the use case of SoftPOS.
Right. Okay. Well, are there other benefits that don't necessarily sort of fit into those buckets that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, I would say if we're thinking about sort of segments that are not utilizing traditional card present payment technology, great example of that is you get some work done in your home by your HVAC or your pool company or what have you. And it's happened to me in the last few months living in Florida. I got to get my AC fixed, right? So sure enough, the guy comes, does a heck of a job. He's going to take the payment. He uses a pretty sophisticated application on an iPad to kind of explain the work he's going to go through and what's going to happen, how much it's going to cost. So I authorize it by using my finger on the iPad, and then the work's done. He shows me what he's done and goes to his telephone or his iPhone and starts plugging in my phone number, tapping it into a phone while I'm sitting there reading it to him. So a couple of things happen in that environment right there. We've got potential security issues, right? If we're writing down or recording card numbers and expiration date and CVV codes, probably a bad thing for the service provider. It's inconvenient for me, the consumer, at that point, reading my card number to him. And then lastly, it's costly, right? It's costly to do card not present. In the way the Visa, MasterCard, and all the schemes roll out interchange, the cost of accepting a payment, if the card is entered into any system, and the card is not tapped or inserted into a reader, the interchange goes very high. It could be 100, 125 basis points, which in a transaction that's $300, we could be talking about a $20 to $30 delta in accepting that payment. So it's a cost savings for an industry segment like service providers. So it's interesting that SoftPOS, as it bridges different types of industry segments or use cases, it presents a different value proposition.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a good segue into our further discussion sort of around the use cases. And I think we could talk about a ton of them, but let's kind of think about some of them that might be relevant to most people, especially, the payments people that are listening, that's going to make a lot of sense to them. But one that quickly pops into my head, and you kind of mentioned it, but small businesses or startups, we used to call them micro merchants. You don't really hear that term as much anymore, but how do you think like a small business or a startup company would use the product?
It would be the replacement of what we've traditionally seen small businesses use. They provision an application from the Play Store by one of the large companies. Those companies usually will send them a free dongle that plugs into their phone, or they're writing down card numbers and pressing them into a phone. Really, really kind of cumbersome use cases. Again, it comes back to security, convenience, and cost of doing business for the small business. But if you think about these segments and the fleets of phones, we keep coming back to phone. We could talk tablet and different use cases in a moment. But the large cell phone providers, the large acquirers, there's a tremendous amount of phones in the business fleet in the marketplace right now, from landscaping to food trucks to floral design, you name it, right? As the use cases just come flying out. And just to take payments has always been somewhat cumbersome. Now we see alternative payment methods like Venmo and Zelle and some of these Cash App become a little bit more streamlined. But let's be honest, there's a lot of us that want to use the cards in our wallet because we get a benefit from those cards. So, using, ACH applications aren't always the best case. And as the average ticket increases for the card holder, the better it is to be using, a card scheme backed payment type. So I like to use my Miles card, and it's not provisioned to every application on my phone. So I still want to pay with that card. And the small business really doesn't have many opportunities to take that unless they're doing it in that old fashioned, almost going back to knuckle buster days where they're just thumbing in a card number and, there's just a lot of holes in that application. So yeah, the small businesses, there's just the oodles of use cases that we have seen so far. And if you look at the trajectory is on a hockey stick up to the right for SoftPOS.
Right. Well, another segment, and you've kind of touched on it, but I'll go a little deeper, is kind of the mobile related businesses. So delivery services, food trucks, service organizations. So can you speak to some of those use cases?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about this, the concept of you calling up and having to, again, from a consumer perspective, cardholder perspective, calling up the local pizza place and having to read your card number over the phone versus walking to the door, getting your pie, go ahead and tapping your phone, a SoftPOS enabled smartphone, and selecting your tip and letting that operator then leave with a card present transaction. Again, we've saved some money. We've increased the security. It also enables for some data analytics for those small businesses. So we can look at payment trends. We can run reports on what payments were happening that day. We could run disputes. So there's a lot of things we can do now that we've electronified, systemically electronified the payment transaction on the smartphone. So for that segment, absolutely, there's a tremendous impact for them if they look at this. And what's really slick about SoftPOS is the way that we can customize these payment applications. So large chain, mid-sized chain. It could be Greg and Tony's Pizza. We've got 30 stores in Florida, and we want to go ahead and have our own payment application on a Play Store for our drivers. Absolutely, you can do things like that. So the flexibility of this is really powerful too. And when you turn on different features and let these small businesses kind of act like the larger chains and compete on a more level basis.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, a huge segment of the payment space that gets a lot of attention, a lot of solutions are out there, are restaurants. So how do you see restaurants using SoftPOS?
Yeah, I'm passionate about restaurants using SoftPOS in that I've watched the pain and suffering it takes for restaurant operators to integrate a payment device. And that's largely how Pay a Table has rolled out in the US in pretty small pockets at this point. The US market, taking a tablet, building a sled, integrating that payment device to your point of sale, which is residing on that tablet, whether it's through Bluetooth or through Wi-Fi or other technologies, becomes very expensive. And then the rollout and execution of it is always a bit of a challenge. Payment devices in restaurant spaces are plagued with some issues. A couple of them are obvious, right? The dropping, the environment when the payment device goes to a table or gets a drink spilled on them. They're not bulletproof, so they're always going to break. So you've got, a very short life cycle, these payment devices. It's a highly attriting estate. So you're rolling out 5, 10, 15, and I've seen up to already in some of our implementations, 50, 60,000 payment devices attached to a tablet. Why do that when we can look at reducing all those costs, taking out the estate that's going to attrit and just cost tens of millions of dollars in some cases, and move to a software solution, a solution that can satisfy the majority of the use case for the restaurant operator? Yes. Is every card going to have an antenna on it? Sometimes even the enabled cards are broken. I had one for a year that was broken. So I know this for a fact. I think it got washed. But you can satisfy. So if a restaurant chain isn't taking, or even a small restaurant operator isn't taking Pay a Table today, but they really want to make that leap. Well, today they're bringing every one of those cards back to the traditional point of sale, inserting it or swiping it in a payment device, and bringing back that receipt to the card holder to tip out and sign. Why not satisfy 70, 80, 90% of those use cases utilizing SoftPOS? So buying the made for purpose or off the shelf ruggedized tablet, putting your point of sale to that tablet and enabling SoftPOS. So to me, I believe that SoftPOS can revolutionize how Pay a Table has been such a long kind of ramp here in the United States. We see it in other countries. I wouldn't say Pay a Table is a exquisite act in other countries. Like we like to make payments a lot more thick here in the United States, whether it's traditional payments or restaurant payments. But it certainly is a way to satisfy a use case that you want to. And then look, at the end of the day, if SoftPOS doesn't cover the bases, why shouldn't it? There's always the ability to add a peripheral, should that be something the restaurant operator needed to do. But my passion is around looking at the card issuance in the United States that are enabled with NFC and utilizing SoftPOS on these tablets. And I think that is going to be the quickest, most elegant solution that restaurants can implement for Pay a Table.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we've covered sort of the small end of the market with small businesses and startups and mobile and restaurants. What about enterprise or larger companies? Can you give us some examples and use cases where SoftPOS makes a lot of sense?
Yeah, it comes down to the same challenges that we covered. So I think the common denominator here is that the benefits per use case will be overlapping in the response. But I've seen some enterprise retailers. If you think about large enterprise retailers, they've got usually an extensive estate of Android devices that do multiple things. Most of them is inventorying and scanning of inventory, management of SKUs. And you see the people using them in the stores. Well, they already have an estate of Android devices and they have NFC. So here's a way that we can do line busting without having to implement a payment peripheral. So that's a really nice use case. Another use case in enterprise is backup. If I'm a high average ticket merchant, or if I'm in an area where we've got connectivity issues, or we really just want to have a disaster recovery type application, SoftPOS is great. Fire up the tablet that you have in the store, grab a signal from your cellular provider and transact, right? So a disaster recovery type of implementation. And then traditional, again, back to we're seeing more and more enterprise retailers wanting to transact where the customer stands and not bring them to a point of sale. So point of sale is moving to the mobility use case. Why not have SoftPOS enabled there? So I think there's a few of those use cases that are more prevalent, but the merchants will invent new ways that SoftPOS will really be perfect for them.
Yeah, you mentioned something I just wanted to kind of double click on. It's not really about the use cases per se, but you mentioned in the US versus other countries. So what's going on in other countries that's different than the US? Is it being adopted more there because there's more devices, or can you explain maybe what you sort of were alluding to about the US being different?
Yeah, I think if you look at any transaction outside of the US, especially Europe, where I've traveled pretty extensively over the past several years, is that we're not really asked to do much at the till other than transact, right? So you see a majority of transactions are just a tap and run out of the store. Whereas here in the United States, in a retail outlet, you're going to see a full colored, large screen payment device. You're going to be able to apply for credit applications. You're going to be able to do pharmacy type sign offs. All that kind of stuff happens on these large integrated devices. And we want to have that same look and feel when we go pay a table even. So if you've seen a good implementation of pay a table, you might take a survey by clicking on the numbers of smiles for your service. You can tip out. You can split the tab, right? All sorts of things you can do. And that's how pay a table is going to work in the US, right? So in Europe, the POS on the personal devices of the servers, and when it's time to transact, out comes a traditional POS type point of sale device hooked up to either Wi-Fi or 4G, 5G, and you just transact there. And because there's VAT tipping taxes, so there's no tipping, makes it a lot easier to implement a pay a table solution in other countries. US, there's just the levels of complexity just go through the roof. So I think what I'm seeing is that, in a nice pay a table application, I should be able to pay my part of the tab on a tap with SoftPOS and hand the device to you. You pay yours and tip out with a tap, and off we go. But that's what I see the difference between the US and other countries is that we love to have a lot of thick tech in the hands of the consumer.
Okay, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been a great episode. It's very enlightening, and I really appreciate you kind of going deep on these subjects, because obviously the last episode was more of a high level. Let's get this series started and really understanding SoftPOS and the background and everything. So this was good to go, much deeper into the value and into the different use cases. So I really appreciate that. Where can people go to learn more about this solution?
Well, SoftPOS in general, just Google that, but definitely in Ingenico.com for deep dives into our SoftPOS implementation. One of the things I would like to say about SoftPOS, and maybe you and I can take a side bet for lunch somewhere one day, is that the adoption of this technology, I believe, is going to revolutionize the space. And if we all look at how we transact 2 or 3 years down the road, let's make a bet that half the transactions that you do 3 years from now, Greg, you got to find me and we'll square this bet up, are going to be through a SoftPOS type application. That we will start to see a change in trending on how retailers, small business, restaurant operators all transact with the SoftPOS type application.
Yeah. I am not one to go shopping very often at all. I get frustrated when there's any sort of line that you have to stand in. I can just imagine these retail companies, larger retailers, where they're 10, 20 people deep waiting to line up to pay. It just seems like with technology we have today, that kind of, and I'm using line busting in air quotes, but call it whatever you want to call it. It just seems like the days of having to stand in a 20-person deep line to pay for something should be in the past, but it doesn't seem to be quite yet.
I couldn't agree more. The endless aisle application is definitely what we see more and more retailers trying to find their strategy.
Yeah. And somewhat connected, I've even read where I don't know if it was Walmart's or somewhere, they're starting to eliminate sort of the self-checkout. It's not really providing the value and I guess that they expected or wanted it to. So that whole concept of self-checkout being a better way just doesn't, I don't know, maybe it's not resonating either.
No, I think it is. What I think is going to happen, though, the self-checkout is going to stay, but the way that we transact out of that self-checkout might still be we're interacting with a screen that is a tablet, powered most likely by Android. And in that screen is an NFC technology. And it just is going to create a much more elegant and sleek implementation of payments where there's not I always say they look like Frankensteins, right? You've got a cash drawer thing, you got a scanner, and then you got a pin pad, and you got to follow the prompts. And why not just transact and do all of that on one single screen? That's where I see this thing going.
Yeah, you're probably right. That would be a lot more simple to execute, you would think. But yeah, let's definitely catch up in 3 years, if not sooner. And either I can buy you lunch or you can buy me, and we'll play a round of golf. How's that?
That sounds good. I don't make bets. I think I'm going to lose. So I'm looking forward to slipping your money.
All right. Well, hey, this has been a great episode. And Tony, I really appreciate your passion for this solution. It obviously comes across very clearly of all the use cases and the value that Ingenico and SoftPOS can bring to the market. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I know your time is very valuable. So I really appreciate you being here.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot. It's been a blast.
Yeah, and to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to explore how SoftPOS can unlock payment freedom for your business, please visit business.ingenico.com/swipe-right-on-softPOS.